There comes a moment in your life when you realize, no matter how many words you say, some people will only hear what they want to hear. You try to explain. You justify your choices. You soften the truth, hoping they'll finally understand. But they don't. And the more you explain, the less they respect you. This story is about a man who spent years explaining himself, until the day he went silent, and everything changed. If you've ever felt like you have to prove your worth to people who still don't see it, this story is for you. Jason had always been the nice guy. The kind who explained every decision, answered every judgment, and constantly cleared misunderstandings, even when they weren't his to clear. In school, when he chose art instead of sports, he explained that he just didn't enjoy team games. When he skipped college parties to work on freelance design, he explained that he was saving for something bigger. And when his friends rolled their eyes or laughed behind his back, he still tried, still explained, still justified, still chased understanding. His entire life became a performance for people who weren't even paying attention. Every step forward came with a backward glance, checking for approval that never came. The weight of words. It didn't matter how many hours Jason worked, or how kind he was, there was always someone twisting the story. His uncle said he was too soft. His ex said he overthought everything. His friends mocked his quiet focus, labeling it arrogance. And every single time, Jason tried to fix it, with words. He'd write long texts, pour his heart out in conversations, and over-explain his decisions to people who already had their minds made up. It exhausted him. He couldn't understand why being clear, being open, still made him misunderstood. It wasn't until a stranger said something small, but sharp, that his mind cracked open. The people who need the most explanation usually aren't listening. And that night, Jason stopped writing his long replies. He went silent, not out of anger, but out of clarity. The shift to silence. At first, it felt unnatural. Staying quiet when someone misunderstood him felt like surrender. But day by day, Jason realized something powerful. His silence wasn't weakness, it was strength. When a colleague questioned why he wasn't socializing at lunch, he smiled instead of explaining. When his cousin asked why he hadn't bought a new car yet, he just nodded. No more lengthy reasons. No more proving he was on the right track. Something magical happened in that stillness. The noise around him got louder, but it no longer reached him. He began pouring all his energy into his craft, graphic design, storytelling, the things that gave him peace. His work improved. His mind calmed. And the fewer words he spoke, the more his presence said everything. People started to notice. Quietly. His clients referred him more. Strangers on social media shared his designs. His once dismissive colleagues began asking how he stayed so focused. And Jason, still quiet, still calm, just smiled. He no longer needed to explain the nights he stayed in to build his brand, or the weekends he chose to rest over partying. His results spoke for him. And funny enough, those who once mocked him now came with compliments, curiosity, even apologies. But Jason didn't need their validation anymore. He had already found something deeper, peace. Real, earned peace. And in that peace, he learned that the loudest power is the one that doesn't beg to be understood. It just exists. Solid. Steady. Enough. Jason used to think that if he could just find the right words, if he could just explain himself well enough, people would finally understand him. That his quiet nature wouldn't be mistaken for arrogance. That his ambition wouldn't be seen as selfishness. That his sensitivity wouldn't be treated like weakness. For years, he thought he had a communication problem. But now, as he sat alone in a cafe where he once tried to win approval with small talk and fake smiles, he realized the truth. He never had a communication issue. He had a boundary issue. He was explaining himself to the wrong people. People who didn't care to understand him. People who listened just long enough to reply, but never to hear. People who filtered everything he said through their own insecurity, jealousy, or indifference. But something about this moment felt different. As he sipped his coffee and stared out at the busy city streets, he felt free. There was no one to impress, no version of himself he had to shrink into. No more reaching. No more chasing conversations that always left him empty. Just peace. The kind of peace you earn after years of trying to prove your worth to people who were never going to see it anyway. He thought back to the countless times he had lowered his voice so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. The moments he apologized for being ambitious, for being honest, for simply having standards. And all those long, late-night texts where he tried to fix relationships that were already broken, relationships that required him to constantly shrink in order to fit. Not anymore. Now, he let people misunderstand him. He let them assume. He let their projections pass through him like wind through a field. He realized that understanding isn't owed, it's a gift people give when they care enough to try. And he'd rather be misunderstood by the wrong people than exhaust himself explaining to people who never really saw him in the first place. His world didn't shrink when he stopped explaining. It expanded. Suddenly, there was more time. More space. More clarity. He began focusing on his morning routine again, reading, running, reflecting. He found power in structure, in silence, in solitude. People noticed his energy shift. Some pulled away, confused by the change. Others came closer, drawn by the quiet confidence that now radiated from him, not loud, not boastful, just unshakable. He didn't say much, but you could feel the difference. It was in the way he walked, shoulders back, eyes forward. It was in the way he said no, calmly, without guilt. It was in how he listened, not to respond, but to truly understand, even when others never offered the same courtesy. He no longer explained why he said no to certain invitations. He no longer justified why he didn't return some calls. He no longer defended his need for space. He simply lived. And that living, rooted in clarity and self-respect, became his language. And something unexpected happened. People began to respect him more. The same friends who once dismissed his discipline now came to him for advice. The same family members who once doubted his career path now bragged about his success. The same strangers who once ignored his art now reached out to collaborate, to praise, to learn. But Jason didn't do it for the applause. He didn't need it anymore. His validation no longer lived in other people's eyes. It lived inside him, built from silent mornings, hard decisions, and the inner knowing that he was finally living life on his own terms. That's what happens when you stop explaining yourself. You stop begging to be seen, and start seeing yourself. Fully. Deeply. Honestly. You begin to understand that people's reactions to your boundaries are not your responsibility. That your truth doesn't require validation. That clarity is freedom. And the ones who are meant for you will never require you to dilute yourself just to keep the peace. So Jason kept walking forward. He no longer turned back to see who was following. He no longer edited himself to keep connections alive. He simply moved, with peace in his chest, purpose in his stride, and a quiet flame behind his eyes. The kind of flame that comes not from proving others wrong, but from finally choosing yourself, without apology, without permission. And as the world around him grew louder, people chasing approval, begging to be heard, explaining their every move, he just kept building in silence. Because once you learn that not everyone deserves access to your energy, you begin to live differently. You begin to walk differently. You begin to shine without asking for permission. Jason didn't need to be understood anymore. He just needed to be true. And in that truth, he found everything he'd been chasing.